Corey, it's trade deadline season. It's like everybody's favorite time of the year to talk about the NBA and talk about the deals that may or may not get done. And at the top of the list right now, one of the biggest names probably on the move, LaMarcus Aldridge from your San Antonio Spurs. I mean, where do you think he lands? How do you think this plays out?
I'm so happy we finally get to talk about San Antonio. It's been weeks. I've been waiting and chomping at the bit. I think, I think they're going to do the buyout. We know that LaMarcus has been productive offensively, 13, almost 14 points a game. But his contract is pretty hefty. You're looking at a $24 million price tag for a 35, 34-year-old player. So I don't necessarily think a trade option's available. So heading into this deadline, I'm thinking, okay, what role can LaMarcus take on a team? And I think, once again, you get someone, you buy out the contract, and then you sit on a contender and come off the bench or have valuable minutes, as a rotation player, give them that 10 points a game and try to go win a championship, and you're going to get paid regardless. Just sign a veteran minimum. That's kind of where I'm thinking. What are you thinking, Kurt? Yeah, pretty much that. I mean, look, at this point, LaMarcus Aldridge, for as great a career as he had, he's kind of a backup five, right? Like he stretches the floor, but he's not mobile on defense. He can help in a role, kind of like Blake Griffin out of when he went to Brooklyn. There's a role for him on some championship teams. I'm gonna look. Brooklyn won't be interested, but Miami needs. I don't want to add another person on the star-studded roster. Probably not. Miami could use help. The Lakers are interested. There's a whole bunch of teams. The Bucks could use help along the front line. But I'll throw out one that I think is interesting. Remember when he signed in San Antonio, who he almost signed with, who he used as leverage? Phoenix Suns. Mm-hmm. That would be an interesting landing spot. They could use help at the five. He'd get to go to a place he likes. It's just something to think about. If you're going to play for the minimum, he gets a little more run there. Now, are they going to win a title? No. If you're chasing a ring, then you're going to the Lakers or the Bucks or somebody. But if you wanted more minutes, and whatever LaMarcus wants, if he wants more minutes, well, he probably gets those and gets some more touches with everybody and Chris Paul and everyone down in Phoenix. So it's just one thing to watch. Do you think it would be more like Portland with Carmelo Anthony? Yeah. Or do you think it would be, or do you think he would take DeAndre Ayton's spot? Oh, no. It'd be much more like Carmelo Anthony. I think he's got to come off the bench, especially about Ayton's been so good defensively. You can't short circuit your growth just to, hey, we're having a great year. Let's short circuit all of that and go. No, you've still got to think long term with this team with Booker and Ayton and Bridges and a young core. You can advance it a little quicker. I just think, it's the Carmelo Anthony, and you can hope he's as productive as Carmelo has been up in Portland. Bring him in, knock down some shots. Look, there's a lot of teams, though, that could use the four. If he wants to get a ring, man, Milwaukee, Lakers, there's going to be a lineup of teams if he's willing to do that. And I think what we've seen with Carmelo Anthony as well is, first of all, Carmelo Anthony can still score at will whenever he wants to, right? He can go for 12 and a quarter, whatever he wants to. And I think LaMarcus is like that at times too, where he can turn it on whenever. And I think when he's coming off the bench in a similar position as Carmelo Anthony, it'll allow him to kind of reestablish his value, because we're looking at a lot of older players are still playing at a high level, but there are times when you need to just basically say, hey, no one wants to trade for me. I got to buy out. This is a time where I almost have to reprove myself to the league that I am worth 18 million, 24 million, 12 million, whatever that number is. So I think this would be a great opportunity if he gets to a place where he can be like a Carmelo Anthony type of player for them. Then he'll be able to show teams, hey, look, I'm still just as valuable, and I'm going to prove it to you. Pay me my money. I just hope he can be that productive. A lot of times with these buyout guys, it's just you're looking for somebody who can come in and give you some minutes during the season, and then in the playoffs, can you help us in certain matchups? Are there specific matchups? If you've got a team that, if you're playing Utah and you're the Lakers, LaMarcus Aldridge suddenly becomes helpful because he's not only a big body, you can pull Rudy Gobert out of the paint. There's certain matchups where you might be able to really use him in the postseason. Another big that is on reportedly rumors on the trade block coming up is John Collins from Atlanta Hawks. He's been balling out this season. What are your thoughts, Kurt? Where does he land? My guess is he is on the move, and I'm really curious to see who steps up, because you're going to have to pay him next year. He is a restricted free agent. He is going to get max money because he's pretty much a walking, bouncy 20 and 10 kind of guy in the right system. If you're Atlanta, yes, you want to keep him, and maybe they keep him and try to re-sign him this summer. But frankly, he overlaps with Clint Capella and DeAndre Hunter, and there's been tension there with him and Trae Young.
I think you're going to see him moved. I'm just curious what team. I mean, there's a lot of teams that could use him. Who's going to step up and pay? The Hawks want they're asking for a lot. The reason there's no deal yet is they're asking for young players and picks in this. And I'm curious if Miami or some other team would step up and throw him in there, because in the right situation, and like the Heat, for example, but I think there's a lot of teams that could really, a lot of young growing teams, if you're Charlotte, you're like, man,
what about New Orleans?
A guy like John. What?
New Orleans
could use him, although they've kind of got a guy at the 4 who's pretty good.
Yeah, what's his name again?
But I mean, again, there's a lot of teams that could use somebody like that. So I wouldn't be surprised if I expect he will be traded, just because the Hawks don't want to pay him this summer. They're not going to it's going to be really hard to pull a sign and trade. He's just going to sign a max contract somewhere, and they're going to have to either match it or not. So they're better off just trying to find a deal at the deadline. They're just asking a lot right now, and I think it's one of those that's going to come right down to the wire.
You mentioned the Miami Heat. What would he be able to add to that Heat team? As you know, they're sitting 500 right now.
They are, but Kelly Olynyk at the 4 they miss Jay Crowder. They miss Jay's defense. I mean, Kelly can shoot the 3, but they miss the kind of solid presence. Now, John Collins isn't kind of veteran solid guy, but he is so much more athletic than anybody they've got up there. And can you imagine a John Collins, Bam Adebayo front line? That is a powerful athletic front line. It goes with, you put Jimmy Butler and their shooters around it. That's really impressive. Now, financially, that becomes really expensive, because now you've got a max. You've paid out Bam. You've paid out Jimmy Butler. You're going to have to pay John Collins. And by the way, Tyler Hero and all these other guys are coming up for contracts. That's an ownership decision, but it would be an interesting fit. It would be such a powerful place to land.
Some other big names that are likely to be traded before the deadline, or we've at least heard rumors throughout the entire season, are Zach Levine in Chicago, Kyle Lowry in Toronto, Bradley Beal in Washington. Are you thinking any of these guys move? What are your thoughts?
I'm going to choose answer D, none of the above. Like, Bradley Beal isn't going anywhere. Bradley doesn't want to be traded, and the Wizards don't want to trade him. So he's absolutely not going anywhere. Zach Levine's an all-star, and as they're evaluating talent right now in Chicago, I mean, unless you're getting a first-team All-NBA kind of power back, like, why are you giving up a young Zach Levine? Like, I don't know that the Bulls are looking to move on from him. There have been Lowry rumors. There's been rumors about him going to Philadelphia and stuff, but, we've talked about this with Andre Drummond and LaMarcus Aldridge before. He makes $30 million on an expiring contract. That's a lot of money to match for a guy who can walk at the end of the season, unless you've got – now, he's still playing at almost an all-star level, but, man, it's a lot to send out to make this work unless you're absolutely sure he makes your team better. And it's just hard to match that salary and not make your team worse in other ways.
He's still playing at a high level, though, Kurt.
Yes, he is. Yeah, and he's still an all-star. And I think if you look like the Clippers, like, could they use a guy like Kyle Lowry? Could Kyle Lowry fit beautifully in Denver next to Jamal Murray? Like, I can keep coming up with landing spots, but $30 million.
Yeah, and then this is where the financial engineering, I would love to just watch like some sort of documentary special on the GMs of these sports leagues. Like how do you maneuver second round picks and first round picks and all these financial contracts? But Kyle Lowry is a great example. And he's mentioned that, I think, as you mentioned briefly there, he wants to retire, if possible, in Toronto. He's one of, one of the most decorated Raptors of all time.
He and the Raptors have kind of come out pretty forcefully and said that there wouldn't be a deal, that he wants. Look, he's the greatest Raptor of all time, right? Like, he is the guy who was the face of the franchise. They're not their best player, because that was probably that Kawhi Leonard guy, but but he was the face of the franchise through the best years of the run in a championship. He is the guy who gets the statue and the jersey retired and all of that. I don't know that they're looking to trade him unless he asks out to go to a contender.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think right now we're into we kind of passed all the big moves. They were all earlier in the season. And then now we're kind of in these smaller some support cast kind of moves that definitely matter, but they're not going to make the splashes of someone like Bradley Beal, who's leading the league in scoring, or Levine, All-Star Levine, or Kyle Lowry.
I think we saw the big trade. It was that James Harden was the big move. And I don't know that we're going to see anything even close to that. I mean, we saw 17 trades at the deadline last year. I don't think we see that many this year.
Yeah, the first one, OKC Detroit. That's the one that kind of kicked off this trade deadline with Diallo. But
Yeah.
one team that our super producer Spencer is a huge Knicks fan. We would be remiss if I get to talk about my Spurs. We don't talk about Spencer's Knicks. What are we even doing? So should the Knicks be buyers or sellers heading into the deadline?
It's so funny. I wanted to be watching Spencer's face on that foul call at the end of the game the other. Julia. Anyway, I'm curious what they do. They've been so conservative under Leon Rose in large part, and I kind of think that probably carries over to this trade deadline. I think they can be buyers or sellers, but just what I want them to continue to do is think long term. They are in playoff position this year. They're slipping a little. They've lost 3 of 4. It's really compact right in the middle of the East, and they went from 4 seed to 8 seed in a matter of a couple of weeks with a couple of losses. That's how the middle of the East is right now. Got to think long term. Don't think about just making these playoffs. Any moves you make have to be about next year and the year beyond. They are building something there, and they've still got to keep that mindset and not start just suddenly thinking short term and we've got to make it because suddenly we've seen it in Phoenix and Atlanta and other places. You short circuit when you start doing that. When you leave the plan to win in the short term, bad things happen.
And it's working, right? We're talking about the Knicks as a playoff team. Even though they're on that little run that you mentioned, they're still 8. They're still in the run, and they look like they're in good hands. Julius Randle is steering that ship pretty well. So I'm with you. Don't do anything crazy. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
When was the last time we were talking about the Knicks as this competent, solid franchise making smart decisions? Like they've made huge leaps this year, man. This is a good team on the floor, and off the floor they look pretty solid so far under Leon Rose. Don't mess with it.